This is Jay Shogren, this is lecture two. I'm gonna switch lecture three and put it in lecture two because I had a lot of questions about this value created by trade. How do we get at it? What do we do about it? So instead of talking about the global economy right now, let's talk about the tools so that everybody's on the same page this first couple weeks. And then we will talk about the global economy in week three. Okay, so economics, the study of value created by trade, just like we said in lecture one. Again, win-win, sum is greater than the parts. Winners win more than losers lose. That's a little more technical. We'll come back to that as we move along. Okay, why does this matter? Well, if you think back, way back, and you think about evolution and the instinct to hoard, right? I mean, evolution says the more resources you possess, the greater your chances to survive and pass down your genes. And our basic instincts a lot of time is just hoard your possessions. I mean, we have houses with our stuff in them, apartments with our stuff in them. And, safety first. A lot of us think like, plan for the worst, hope for the best. So let's get our ditty bag together here in case things get bad. Let's hoard our possessions, right? That's our initial instinct. And when you're out in the wilderness, you want to make sure you don't waste any of your resources and you have what you need and you have it with you. Now, economics essentially is trying to teach you the opposite, that there's a roundabout way to get even more resources than if you just hoard, and that's trading. So we trade goods that are low in value to us to somebody who has a higher relative value for it. I gain, you gain, we all gain. In that process, we all have more resources, right? So if economics for the last 270 years has been trying to convince people that if you can overcome your basic instinct to hoard your resources and instead accept trade as the path to get even more resources, you're going to do better. Your chances of survival are higher. Your chances to pass down your genes are even higher than that. And so, this idea that trade is just something that happens today, no, it's something that goes way back to why we're here, Homo sapiens, and Neanderthals aren't. So, if we think about this, trade, humans, and Neanderthals, those links are to the paper that we wrote back 15 years or so ago, in which we showed that because Homo sapiens traded more relatively than Neanderthals, we're still here and Neanderthals went extinct. This is probably the paper I got the most visibility in the press on because people were like, "Whoa, this is really interesting. Why are we here and Neanderthals aren't?" Given that they were well suited for the environment and they may have been biologically more adept at dealing with climate, and Homo sapiens weren't. And our argument was based on the evidence that Homo sapiens traded relatively more than Neanderthals. And even though the Neanderthals had a biological advantage, Homo sapiens had an economic advantage through trade. Again, Neanderthals hoarded more, Homo sapiens traded more, and this is one rationale for why Neanderthals went extinct 30,000 years ago. I mean, we're economists, we're not anthropologists, but we're taking economics to look at a critical question about why we're here. Right? So Neanderthals and hoarding. If you were to go in look at a Neanderthal settlement, it seems that the housing, the huts, the however they set up their settlement, their village, productivity stayed constant, the economy stayed constant, and because what it looked like is each hut had sort of similar objects inside of it. There was no specialization. I'd have shells, I'd have stones, I'd have bones, so would you, and all the way through it, right? And so, in that context, everything was fine as long as there was no competition, right? I mean, you're productivity was constant, your economy was constant. But once someone came into the picture that traded more and was able to capture more resources, eventually population stagnated and then declined, even though they were biologically potentially more fit for the environment than Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens, it seemed to, as they looked again at the settlements of early Homo sapiens, they seemed to be more specialization. My hut had more shells. Your hut had more polished stones. Another hut had more bones, in the sense that I focused on what I did best, which was collect shells. You focused in on what you did best. The third person focused in on what he or she did best, whether it was hunting or agriculture. But what it allowed for, this specialization, is that you were able to produce technologies and you were able to update technologies quicker because you specialized. And by specialization and trade, you could come up with a better mousetrap, so to speak, and trade it to someone else who's a better hunter, and you could end up with more food, which would mean more fertility, which would mean a greater population, and it would keep this circle going so that productivity increased and economic growth increased, such that pretty soon your population is expanding relative to anyone else who was not trading as much as you, which would have been the Neanderthals. So looking at this graph here, you can see the Neanderthal population started off high, Homo sapiens started off low. At some point, once you run this simulation model that allows Homo sapiens to trade relatively more, you can see the Homo sapiens took over the environmental system, and Neanderthals eventually went extinct. This population over time, this graph here, was pretty powerful in the sense of economists stepping into anthropology and offering up insight from our tools, value created by trade, makes a big difference, and not just in happiness, but in actual who's here and who went extinct. The anthropologists were very interested in this work as well. Economists stepping into their field and talking about how their models affect things. The popular press, as I said, was very interested in this. Political commentators, those of the right leaning, would say, see, if you don't believe in free trade, you must be a Neanderthal. That's not what we had in mind, but that's how some people sold it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about economic value. Supply, demand, and economic value. This graph right here, you are going to see all semester long, so get used to it, dig in, figure it out. If you've seen it before in principles, you're probably okay, you're feeling comfortable with it. If you've never seen this graph, all right, send me an email. We can set up a Zoom meeting to talk about it, go through it. But you really got to get your head wrapped around the supply and demand graph and the idea of market clearing price and economic value. Okay, so when we talk about what's economic value, we got to talk about supply demand. So first, let's look at supply. The supply curve represents the value at which people are willing to accept compensation to sell a good or service. And we call it the willingness to accept, or the minimum price a seller will accept. Right? And so the supply curve then represents all the willingness to accept of all the sellers, rank ordered from low to highest value. By rank ordered from low to highest value, that means, if you can see, starting here at the origin, we're down in the southwest corner, supply is upward sloping, which says that the people who are selling down in the southwest corner are the low-cost suppliers. Why are they low-cost suppliers? A, they're smarter. B, they have access to better resources. They could also be paying less wages. They could be also using child labor. They could also be not following environmental regulations. There's lots of reasons why things are low cost, right? And some of them are acceptable to us and some of them are not acceptable to us. I mean, if it's slave labor that's producing a low cost product, do you want to buy it or not, right? And so the supply curve then would suggest that folks who have the lowest costs are most likely going to sell, and those who have the highest cost are not. They might just be priced out of the market, right? So the supply curve is upward sloping. Now, when we think about demand, that's just the opposite story, the opposite side of the coin. The price at which people are willing to and able, I guess that's key, you got to have the money to pay to buy a good and service. So the price at which people are willing and able to pay to buy a good or service. So the willingness to pay, the maximum price a buyer will pay to buy a good or service. And here for the demand curve, they're rank ordered from highest willingness to pay to lowest, excuse me, lowest willingness to pay. All right, so what does that look like? That looks like this. So you can see the people with the highest willingness to pay are up in the northwest corner, and then it falls down to the southeast corner, and where you've got folks who are either don't want the good or service or don't have the ability to buy the good or service. So the demand curve is ranked from high to low, and the supply curve is ranked from low to high. Together, they're going to give us this market equilibrium, right? And the market equilibrium is the price and quantity that clears the market. All right, so P star and Q star are going to represent the price in which supply equals demand. So let's take a look at an example here. Here's a market equilibrium in which the price is 6 and the quantity is 6. So how do we get that? Well, you can see this little chart in the middle of the figure where it says a price of 0. Well, there's quantity supplied, that's QS. Nobody's supplying it at 0 price. I mean, 0. Nobody's giving it away for free. And QD is the quantity demanded. Well, 12 units are demanded at 0 price. They're not going to get it, but that's how much I'd be willing, that's how many people would be asking for the product if it was free. Now, as you raise the price, you go to 2. Now you can see 2 units are supplied and 10 units are demanded. So we have more demand than supply. If we go to price 4, now we see 4 units are supplied, 8 units are demanded. Again, demand is greater than supply. We have a shortage still. So there's pressure to raise the price to 6. And now in this case, 6 are supplied and 6 are demanded. That is the market clearing price. That is the market equilibrium. Price is 6, quantity demanded is 6. If we were to go to price 8, now we'd see the opposite story. Now we'd see that 8 was supplied, but only 4 was demanded. Right? So here now we have a surplus. Sellers are throwing it out on the market at that high price, but we don't have any demanders. If the price goes to 10, same story. Bunch of supply out there, 10 units, but very few demanders. So the market equilibrium price of 6 and the market equilibrium quantity of 6, everything to the left of that market equilibrium price are the people in the market. Okay? Those are the folks that are selling, and those are the folks that are buying. Everyone to the right of the market equilibrium price, those folks are out of the market. Sellers want too much money. Demanders are not willing to pay enough. They're gone. So it's the market has cleared. We now have a price and a quantity. And from that information, we can calculate economic value, which will be part 2 of this lecture.